I've been staying out of the way of law enforcement all this time. I thought I was doing the best thing by not coming down on law enforcement, and it's been too many years of no action. Nothing's been done, so I'm tired of waiting. The investigator over the case right now out of Scurry County, he told me one time, he said he doesn't care if it takes 20 years to do this. And I do care if it takes 20 years. I don't want the person that hurt my kid that doesn't need to walk the street for 20 years.
There is a moment in every true crime case, one single moment, where everything changes, where the truth stops hiding and starts bleeding through the cracks. In this documentary, that moment comes early, and when it does, it will stop you cold. December 27, 2010, Colorado City, Texas. A quiet, tight-knit town of barely 4,000 people sitting out in the wide-open stretch of West Texas, about 230 miles from Dallas. The kind of town where folks leave their doors unlocked, where neighbors look out for each other, and where the biggest drama on any given Tuesday is usually just high school football. Nobody in Colorado City had any reason to believe their town was about to become the center of one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking true crime investigations the Lone Star State had ever seen. But on that cold December morning, something happened inside a modest home on Chestnut Street that would shatter this community to its core, and leave a father desperately searching for his daughter for years. 13-year-old Haley Dunn was a cheerleader. She played saxophone in the school band. She competed in volleyball, basketball, and softball. She loved school, loved her friends, and without fail, every single day, she walked across the street to say hello to her dad. She was bright, she was full of life, and by every account from everyone who knew her, she was exactly the kind of kid who makes a small town feel like home. And then, just like that, she was gone. No goodbye, no note, no confirmed sightings, nothing. But here's the detail that separates this true crime case from almost anything else you will find in the documentary world. When investigators sat down with the one person closest to this disappearance and asked him, point blank, where they should be looking for this missing 13-year-old girl, he gave them a specific county, a remote stretch of land more than 20 miles outside of town. He named it without hesitation. And years later, that is exactly where her remains were found. Then investigators asked him one more question. They asked who they should be paying attention to. Who did he personally consider a suspect in the disappearance of this child? And his answer, delivered without flinching, was just 4 words long. Both of us. This is the true crime documentary record of Haley Dunn. A case full of unanswered questions, staggering investigative failures, and a father whose love for his daughter refused to let the world forget her name. A case that stretched over a decade, produced 1 arrest, and still, to this day, has not delivered the justice this family deserves. Stay with us. Because before this documentary is over, you are going to be asking yourself the same question this entire community that never stopped asking. How does something like this happen? Right in the middle of a town where everybody knows everybody, and still go unsolved? To understand what happened to Haley Dunn, you have to go back to the morning it all began. Not the morning her father realized she was gone. Not the morning the police were called. But the actual morning, December 27, 2010. The last day anyone who loved her ever saw her alive. Haley had spent most of Christmas Day and the day after Christmas over at her dad Clint's house right across the street. Her grandmother Connie later said the girl was in a genuinely great mood those days. She was excited, happy, and especially thrilled about the brand new iPod she had received as a Christmas gift. That was Haley, full of energy, full of life, the kind of teenager who could light up a room just by walking into it. That night, December 26th, Haley's older brother David, who was 16 at the time, went to a friend's house to stay overnight. Haley stayed home. She played video games late into the night, completely relaxed, completely normal. There was absolutely nothing about that evening that suggested the next 24 hours would change everything. Then came December 27th. At 5:30 in the morning, Sean Adkins, the boyfriend of Haley's mother, Billie Jean Dunn, left the house for work. He was heading to Snyder, Texas, roughly 50 miles away, where he was employed at the time. About an hour later, Billie Jean herself got up, got ready, and left for her own 12-hour work shift. Before walking out the door, she stopped by Haley's bedroom and looked in on her daughter. Haley was still asleep in her bed. Everything looked completely normal. Billie later said she assumed that once Haley woke up, she would probably just do what she always did, walk across the street, and spend some time with her dad. Billy also left her personal cell phone at home so the kids would have a way to reach someone if they needed anything. So as of that morning, Haley Dunn was home alone. And that is where the straightforward part of the story ends. Because across town in Snyder, something unexpected and was already happening. Sean Adkins arrived at his job site at approximately 6 in the morning. According to his own account, just 10 minutes after he got there, he had a heated argument with his boss and quit on the spot. He said he was fired. He said his boss let him go. The story changed depending on who was asking, but his supervisor told investigators something very different. According to the supervisor, Sean walked in, bought a drink, turned in his work uniform, and walked right back out. By 6:10 in the morning, he was already gone. No argument, no confrontation. He had simply decided to leave. So now, just over 30 minutes after Billie Jean left for work, Sean Adkins was unemployed, unaccounted for, and heading back in the direction of Colorado City, with the entire day in front of him, and a 13-year-old girl home alone on Chestnut Street. What happened next is where this true crime case begins to crack wide open. According to Sean, after leaving Snyder, he drove directly to his mother's house in Big Spring to use her computer and apply for unemployment benefits. He said he stayed there for several hours before eventually heading back to Colorado City. He claimed he arrived back home around 3 in the afternoon and that he personally saw Haley at approximately 3:15, just before she supposedly walked over to her father's house. That was his story. And on the surface, it might have sounded reasonable enough, except for one thing. Cell phone records do not lie. Tower data from Sean's phone told a completely different story. Between 6:35 and 6:56 that same morning, his phone was connecting to a cell tower located in Colorado City, nearly 50 miles from Big Spring, and just minutes away from the house where Haley was home alone. The records did confirm he eventually made it to Big Spring, but not until 9:38 in the morning, nearly 3 hours after he claimed. He went straight there. And he did not leave Big Spring until 2:40 in the afternoon. Now do the math. If Sean left Big Spring at 2:40, and Colorado City is nearly 40 miles away, there is simply no version of events in which he was standing in front of Haley Dunn at 3:15. The timeline does not work. It never worked. And investigators knew it from almost the very beginning. Meanwhile, back in Colorado City, Haley's father Clint was going about his afternoon the way he always did, expecting his daughter to come knocking on his door at any moment. She did it every single day. Sometimes before school, sometimes after, sometimes just to drop by and say hello. It was their routine. It was something Clint counted on. But on December 27th, his door never opened. His phone never rang. And as the afternoon turned to evening, that familiar, comfortable silence started to feel like something else entirely. Around 2 in the afternoon, a text message was sent from the cell phone that Billy had left at home for the kids. The message went out to one of Haley's friends. Just 4 words. "What are you doing?" The friend never replied. That may have been the last communication ever sent from Haley's direction on that phone. At around 4 in the afternoon, Haley's brother David came home. He tried the front door. It was locked. He knocked again. Nobody answered. So David did what any teenager would do. He found a window and climbed inside. And when he got in, he found Sean Adkins standing in the hallway. David later described the look on Sean's face as pure shock, like a deer caught in headlights, confused, startled, like a man who had not expected anyone to walk through that door. That evening, Sean picked Billy up from work. When they got back to the house on Chestnut Street, Haley was not there. Billy asked Sean where she was. He told her Haley had left on foot, walked over to her dad's house, and then planned to spend the night at her friend Mary Beth's place. Clint Dunn said that was not true. Haley never came to his house that day, not once.
That was my day, and then I came home around, I guess like 3 o'clock I got there, and Haley was there watching TV in the living room, and I went to me and Billy's bedroom, and she came in there and told me that she was going to her father's house and that she was staying the night with a friend, and then she left. And then I was there by myself for maybe an hour at the most, and then David and a friend came over, and they went to his room, and they were playing video games and so forth, and Billy called me and told me that that her relief got there and that she's going to get to leave a little early, so I was up there at the hospital in Snyder around 6 o'clock to pick her up, and then we came back, and then we went to bed shortly after that.
And this whole time you were thinking Haley was at a friend's house?
Yes.
About what time did she say she was leaving at?
What time Haley was leaving? I guess it was sometime in between 3 and 3:30 when she said she was leaving. It was like shortly after I got there. I'm not real sure about a time.
Does she normally call and check in every so often, or is it normal to not hear from her for so long?
It's pretty normal for her just to not call, because she usually does that though, because she does stay the night at a friend's house. She'll be back the next morning.
And when Billy called Mary Beth's family the following morning, Mary Beth's parents confirmed the same thing. Haley had never been there. No one had been expecting her. There were no plans. And when investigators looked inside Haley's bedroom, what they found made the whole story collapse completely. Nothing was missing. Her clothes were still there. Her belongings were still in place. Everything a 13-year-old girl would naturally take if she planned to spend the night somewhere. All of it was right where it had always been. Haley Dunn had not packed a bag. She had not said goodbye. She had not made any plans. She had simply vanished. The missing person report was not filed until the afternoon of December 28th, a full day after she was last seen. And when police first received the report, they initially classified it as a runaway case. That decision would later draw serious criticism from investigators, journalists, and the community alike. Because Haley Dunn was not a runaway. She was a 13-year-old girl who loved school and loved her dad, and had not missed a single day of stopping by his house across the street until the day she disappeared forever. When a child goes missing in a small town, the reaction is immediate. It is personal. It is collective. And in Colorado City, Texas, it happened almost overnight. The moment word spread that the 13-year-old Haley Dunn had not come home, this tight-knit community of 4,000 people did exactly what small towns do. They showed up. Neighbors, strangers, local business owners, high school students, all of them poured out into the streets ready to help find her. Volunteers organized search parties. Flyers went up on every telephone pole, every storefront window, every bulletin board in Mitchell County. People walked the roads, checked the empty lots, and covered ground that law enforcement alone simply could not cover fast enough. It was the kind of community response that reminds you why small towns still matter in this country. Everyone wanted to find Haley. Everyone wanted to bring her home. Everyone, it seemed, except the 2 people living in the house where she was last seen. Haley's father, Clint Dunn, was out there every single day, absolutely relentless. He checked dumpsters. He walked the alleys. He searched every corner of Colorado City he could reach on foot. People who were there during those early days later said Clint's pain was visible in everything he did, in the way he moved, the way he looked at every passing car, the way he refused to stop even when his body had nothing left to give. That man was not going to rest until he found his daughter, and everyone around him knew it. But observers quickly began to notice a sharp and deeply troubling contrast. Billie Jean Dunn, Haley's own mother, was willing to talk to the media. She gave interviews, she appeared on camera, she handed out flyers in town. But when search efforts expanded into the wider, more remote areas surrounding Colorado City, the open fields, the brushland, the stretches of West Texas terrain where a child could disappear without a trace, Billie did not participate. She later explained that she could not bring herself to search those areas because it forced her to confront the possibility that people were looking for her daughter's body rather than a living, breathing girl. Some people accepted that explanation, many others did not. And then there was Sean Adkins. He did not hand out a single flyer. He did not join a single search party. He did not knock on a single door asking if anyone had seen Haley. While an entire community was turning itself inside out looking for this child, the man who was the last known person to see her alive was nowhere to be found in those efforts. He stayed away from the searches. He stayed away from the volunteers. And for the most part, he stayed away from investigators, at least willingly. That absence was noticed. It was talked about. And it would not be forgotten.
Into day 9 in the search for Haley Dunn, and there's still no sign of her. When I visited with the Dunn family this morning, I saw Texas Rangers scouring through Haley's room. If we take a look over here, this is the window to her bedroom. Now, Texas Rangers, I'm told, have not found anything and no sign of foul play or any sign of her packing her bags and running away from home at this time. More than a week later and still no sign of Haley. Her mother says it's frustrating, but she remains hopeful.
But I have to do nothing but hope that she left by herself and that she's going to come back to me, because if I don't cling on to that hope, I don't have anything.
Now, local authorities tell me they're following several tips at this time. Several agencies have stepped in, and the reward once again is $25,000 for tips that lead to Haley.
4 days after Haley was reported missing on New Year's Eve, something happened that genuinely stunned the people of Colorado City. A party took place at the house on Chestnut Street, the very house Haley had vanished from just days earlier. People gathered, music played. The celebration went on late into the night. Billie Jean later said she had not even realized it was New Year's Eve, and that friends and family had simply come over to offer support. But across the street, Clint Dunn was standing on his front porch in the cold with a pair of binoculars, scanning the darkness for any sign of his missing daughter. He watched the lights. He heard the noise. And in one of the most heartbreaking moments of this entire true crime case, he later told reporters exactly what was going through his mind. He said he simply could not understand how anyone could celebrate anything while his daughter was still out there somewhere, unaccounted for, in the middle of a Texas winter. That image, a grieving father on his porch, with binoculars while a party carried on inside the house across the street, became one of the defining moments of this case in the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, the formal investigation was moving quickly. On January 4th, 2011, both the Texas Rangers and the FBI officially joined the investigation into Haley's disappearance. That level of involvement signaled clearly that local law enforcement was no longer treating this as a simple missing persons case. More than 100 billboards carrying Haley's photo and case information went up across Texas and into neighboring states. The story caught national attention when television host Nancy Grace covered the case on her program and interviewed Billie Jean Dunn on air. Overnight, the disappearance of Haley Dunn became a story the entire country was watching.
Was on national television, and Nancy Grace seemed to be a little hard on you. What was that like, hearing her question Billie like that?
I heard about it. I wasn't there when Billie was getting interviewed by her. I was talking to the Texas Rangers, but I heard about it, and it's frustrating, what she said about me, but it really doesn't bother me because, my main focus is just Haley, because we just want her to come home safe.
Does it hurt to think people would point fingers at you, the person who cares about her?
Yeah, it hurts. It does.
Describe to me the relationship between you and Haley.
It's a really good relationship, and I love her with all my heart, and I believe she loves me with all her heart, and we get along just fine.
See, is there anything else you want people to know about you and your relationship with the family at all? Because it seems like a lot of people are buzzing on the internet about it.
Yeah, as far as me, Haley, and Billie and David, we all get along just fine. And I would never do nothing to that little girl. I love her with all my heart. And I just wish for her safe return.
On January 5th, just one day after the Rangers and FBI stepped in, Billie asked Sean to leave the house. People close to the situation said that was not entirely unusual. The two of them had a volatile relationship and had separated and reconciled multiple times before. But this time, the circumstances were different. The investigation was closing in, and the details emerging about the home life on Chestnut Street were painting a picture that was far darker than anything the public had initially been told. Reporters and investigators began learning that the environment inside that house had been complicated for a long time. There were accounts of heavy drinking, frequent parties involving adults, and an overall atmosphere. That was difficult for two teenagers to grow up in. One journalist who covered the case closely later recalled receiving reports that described a home where the lifestyle of the adults often overshadowed the needs of the children living there. And then investigators started looking into the history between Billie Jean Dunn and Sean Adkins more carefully. What they found was not new to local law enforcement. Roughly 10 months before Haley disappeared, police had already been called to that house on Chestnut Street to respond to a domestic disturbance between the couple. Both Billie and Sean had called police on each other the same night. Officers who arrived on scene described the situation as aggressive and emotionally volatile. Threats had been made. The situation had escalated significantly before police arrived to defuse it.
Report on somebody.
What exactly happened?
I broke up with this guy a couple of days ago, and he's telling me that he's going to kill me and that it's going to be remembered for a long time.
I got a situation on my hands. I have an ex-girlfriend. She's taking me a whole bunch of anxiety pills that I take. So I guess she got them from me, and she said she took a bunch of her pain pills too. And she's saying that she wants to die, so she filed a report on me, for threats and stuff like that. So she's just upset about it. She's just, not being herself right now. Threatening to kill her.
Damn it.
It's Billy Dunn.
Oh, God. He's been going all day. All right.
And yet, just like every time before, the couple eventually reconciled. Sean moved back in. Life on Chestnut Street went on. People who knew Haley personally began coming forward during the investigation, with details that made the picture even more concerning. Several of them said that Haley did not feel comfortable around Sean Adkins. She did not see him as a stepfather or any kind of parental figure. According to those close to her, Haley was genuinely uneasy in his presence.
Things that Haley used to tell me about the man.
What kind of things?
She didn't like him. She didn't trust him. She was afraid of him.
I don't want to be here right now. I'm going to be here with you because I don't feel right with.
Her grandmother Connie later revealed something particularly disturbing, that Haley had confided in her. That on multiple nights, sometimes late at night, she had noticed the shadow of a person standing near the door of her bedroom, and it frightened her. Billie Jean, for her part, described the relationship between Haley and Sean as more of a friendship than anything else, but the people closest to Haley told a very different story. Investigators then turned their full attention to the cell phone records and bank activity connected to both Sean Adkins and Billie Jean Dunn. And what they found in those records began to tear apart nearly every element of the story that had been presented to them. First, there was the matter of Sean's job. He had told police he was fired from his workplace in Snyder, but his supervisor directly contradicted that claim, telling investigators that Sean had arrived that morning, bought a drink, turned in his uniform, and simply walked off the job on his own. By 6:10 in the morning, he was gone. When confronted with this, Sean admitted he had lied about being fired. He said he did not want to get into an argument with Billie Jean over losing his job. One lie, explained. But the cell phone data revealed something far more serious than a story about getting fired. Those records showed that between 6:35 and 6:56 that morning, Sean's phone was pinging off a cell tower in Colorado City, the same town where Haley was home alone, not Big Spring, not the road between Snyder and Big Spring, Colorado City. And while the records did eventually place him in Big Spring later that morning, he did not arrive there until nearly 9:40 in the morning, and he did not leave until 2:40 in the afternoon. Beyond that, additional cell tower data placed Sean's phone in the vicinity of Scurry County at some point during that same day. That detail on its own might not have meant much to an outside observer, but investigators were paying very close attention. Because weeks earlier, when detectives had sat down with Sean and asked him where he thought Haley might be, he had answered without hesitation. Scurry County. He had named it before anyone had searched there, before any evidence pointed there, before any remains were found there. He named it first. And then, when those same investigators asked Sean directly who they should be looking at, who he personally believed was responsible for Haley's disappearance, he gave an answer that stopped the room cold. Both of us. Polygraph examinations were administered to both Billie Jean Dunn and Sean Adkins during the early weeks of the investigation. The first round had to be redone entirely because both subjects were under the influence of substances at the time of testing. Billie attributed her condition to prescribed anxiety medication. The second round of testing showed indicators of deception on multiple key questions from both individuals. Sean, for his part, walked out of the polygraph process on at least 2 occasions, refusing to complete the examination. He called it a witch hunt. He said investigators were trying to force a confession out of him for something he did not do. But even in the moments when he did engage, the answers he gave, the ones that registered as truthful, were the ones that should have kept everyone up at night. Scurry County. Both of us. And still, at that point, there was not enough evidence to make an arrest. So the searches continued. The community kept showing up, the billboards kept going up across Texas. And somewhere out in the cold, flat stretch of West Texas land, the truth about what happened to Haley Dunn was still waiting to be found.
Everyone for coming this afternoon and giving me an opportunity to make a statement. First, I want to speak directly to Haley in case she's listening. Wherever you are, Haley, I'm looking for you. Hundreds of people are looking for you. We all want you home safe. I just want to see and touch your beautiful face. I really love you. I desperately need you home. And there's not a minute goes by I'm not praying for you or crying, wishing you were in my living room. I can't handle not knowing where you are or if you're safe. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever laid my eyes on, and I'm very proud that God chose me to be your mother. Next, I want to say, if someone out there has Haley, please let her go. Just turn her loose, drop her off at a church, a school, a police station, anywhere that she can get to a phone and call police or call her family. I've been flat out called a liar by some people. Others speculate on my possible involvement in Haley's disappearance or wonder if I'm covering up for somebody. Some people accuse me of withholding information and not cooperating with law enforcement. These things are not true, but I now feel that I have to defend myself from ridiculous accusations, slander, or defamation of character.
In every true crime investigation, there comes a moment when the case stops being about missing pieces and starts being about the pieces that were there all along, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to look close enough. In the case of Haley Dunn, that moment came in the form of what investigators found when they finally got inside the homes connected to the two people at the center of this story. And what they found did not just raise questions, it fundamentally changed the entire direction of the investigation. As the weeks pressed on into January and February of 2011, detectives were quietly and methodically building a picture of the world Haley Dunn had been living in. On the surface, the house on Chestnut Street looked like any other home in Colorado City. Modest, unremarkable, the kind of place you would drive past 100 times without giving it a second thought. But behind that front door, investigators were uncovering a reality that was far more disturbing than anything the neighborhood could have imagined. During the search of the residence, law enforcement came across printed materials that immediately caught their attention. Billie Jean Dunn and Sean Adkins had printed out hundreds of internet articles. The subject matter of those articles was not casual reading. The materials focused heavily on serial killers, acts of extreme violence, and the targeted harm of family members. Investigators documented and collected everything they found. When Billie was later asked about those materials, she told police that both she and Sean simply had a personal fascination with dark and disturbing subject matter, and that a lot of people who follow true crime are interested in the same kinds of topics. That explanation did not sit well with the investigators working the case. But as alarming as those printed materials were, they were not the most significant discovery law enforcement made during this phase of the investigation. That came on February 24, 2011, nearly 2 months after Haley disappeared, when authorities made a find that sent shockwaves through the investigation and left the community of Colorado City stunned. On a USB flash drive recovered from inside the Chestnut Street home, and separately on a computer located at the residence of Sean's mother, investigators discovered a collection of images so deeply troubling that the details of this discovery were immediately escalated to the highest levels of the investigation. The total number of images recovered across both locations came to more than 100,000. The content of those images involved the exploitation of minors. The sheer volume of what was found was staggering by any measure. Not dozens, not hundreds, but more than 100,000 individual files, stored and accessible inside environments where children had been living. Let that number sit with you for a moment. 100,000. Despite the magnitude of that discovery, no criminal charges were filed in connection with those images at that time. The materials were forwarded to a grand jury for review. The local sheriff publicly acknowledged the complexity of the situation, noting that because more than one person had been living in each location, investigators had to determine and confirm exactly who is responsible for the presence of those files before any arrest could be made. It was a legally sound position. But for the family and community watching from the outside, the absence of immediate accountability was deeply painful and profoundly difficult to accept. There was another detail connected to those discoveries that Haley's father, Clint, later shared publicly, one that added yet another layer of frustration to an already agonizing situation. After investigators took a laptop computer into evidence and secured it at the local police station, Sean's stepfather reportedly went directly to that station and demanded the laptop be returned. And according to Clint, it was. That piece of evidence, stored at a police station in the middle of an act of murder, investigation involving a missing child, was handed back. Whether that decision had any impact on the overall case has never been fully clarified publicly. But for the people who had been fighting for Haley from the very beginning, it was one more moment in a long line of moments that made justice feel impossibly far away. The investigation pushed forward, and on March 17, 2011, it produced the first actual arrest connected to the case, though not the one the community had been hoping for. That morning, law enforcement officers went to the home where Billy and Sean were residing to speak with Sean in connection with the ongoing investigation. When officers arrived, Billie Jean told them Sean was not there. But when investigators entered the property with a warrant, they found Sean Adkins inside the house, out of sight. He had been there the entire time, and Billy had looked officers in the face and told them he was not. Billie Jean Dunn was arrested and charged with providing false information to law enforcement. In June of 2011, she received a suspended 90-day jail sentence along with 1 year of probation for lying about Sean's location. She served her probation more than 250 miles away in Travis County, where she and Sean had relocated together following the events in Colorado City. The fact that the two of them had moved away from the town at the center of an active investigation into a missing child, a child who was Billy's own daughter, did not go unnoticed by investigators or by the public watching this case unfold. The couple eventually separated in 2012. And in the years that followed, Billie Jean Dunn began to distance herself from the position she had taken in the early days of the investigation. She later told reporters that over time, as the evidence mounted, and as both local police and the FBI continued to name Sean as their primary person of interest, she herself had started to believe that Sean likely had something to do with what happened to Haley. She said she could not fully explain why she had stayed with him after her daughter disappeared, but she said she was no longer surprised by what Rendezvous investigators believed about him. Back in Colorado City, Clint Dunn never left. He never stopped searching. He never stopped making phone calls and sending messages to investigators, demanding that they keep working the case. He posted about Haley on social media constantly, not just on anniversaries or during media cycles, but regularly, consistently, month after month, and year after year. He refused to let his daughter's story fade into the background noise of cold case archives. He was determined that her name would not be forgotten, and in a way that no one could have fully anticipated at the time, that determination would eventually produce one of the most unexpected developments the investigation had seen. But before that development arrived, there was one more chapter of waiting, one more stretch of painful, exhausting silence, because as 2011 turned to 2012, and 2012 turned to 2013, Haley Dunn was still out there somewhere, and the question of where was the one thing every person connected to this case, every investigator, every volunteer, every neighbor, every friend, was still carrying with them every single day. And then, on March 16, 2013, a hiker walked into a remote field in Scurry County, Texas, near a reservoir called Lake J.B. Thomas, located more than 20 miles outside of Colorado City, and they found her.
2013, local authorities were notified of human remains located near Lake J.B. Thomas in southwest Scurry County. The remains were sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification for DNA analysis. On April 26, 2013, the Scurry County District Attorney's Office received written confirmation that the remains have been positively identified as those of Haley Dunn.
Skeletal remains were recovered from that location and submitted for forensic analysis. DNA testing conducted through the University of North Texas confirmed what investigators had feared for more than 2 years. The remains belonged to Haley Dunn. She had been out there in the exact county that Sean Adkins had named before any search had ever been conducted there since the day she disappeared. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide. Clint Dunn later shared that investigators told him the most likely cause was blunt force trauma to the head from an unknown object. No weapon was ever publicly identified. No direct forensic link to a specific individual was announced, but the investigation now had something it had not had before. A confirmed crime, a confirmed victim, and a confirmed location. And the community of Colorado City, Texas, which had spent over 2 years hoping against hope that Haley might somehow still be found alive, finally had to face the truth that the people closest to this case had feared from the very beginning. Haley was gone, and someone had taken her. For Clint Dunn, the discovery brought a grief so deep it was almost impossible to put into words. But it also brought something else, a renewed and unshakable determination, because now this was not just a missing persons case. This was a murder investigation, and Clint Dunn was not going to stop, not for a single day. until the person responsible for his daughter's death was held accountable. Tragically, the family had to wait an additional 4 years before they were even able to lay Haley to rest.
His mother, desperate to find her daughter's killer, is speaking out. It was 6 years ago when 13-year-old Haley Dunn went missing after leaving her father's home in Colorado City, that's west of Abilene. Her remains were found 3 years later, but her killer remains at large. Her mother, who is from Austin, says she has hope justice will be served.
I still want to believe every time you tell me that there's going to be an arrest soon.
Due to the extended legal and forensic processes connected to the case, Haley Dunn was not buried until January of 2017, more than 6 years after she disappeared. 6 years, and still no arrest had been made. There is a particular kind of suffering that belongs exclusively to the families of unsolved cases. It is not the sharp, sudden pain of immediate loss, though that pain is there too. It is something slower, something that settles into your bones over months and years and refuses to leave. It is the suffering of waiting, of watching the calendar turn again and again, while the person responsible for destroying your family continues to walk free, of picking up the phone to call investigators and hearing the same non-answers you heard the last time, and the time before that, and the time before that. For Clint Dunn, that suffering became the defining reality of his life from 2013 all the way through the better part of a decade. His daughter had been found. Her death had been confirmed as a homicide. The investigation had a clear and undisputed prime suspect, and yet, year after year, the case sat without movement, without charges, without justice.
I've been staying out of the way of law enforcement all this time. I thought I was doing the best thing by not coming down on law enforcement, and it's been too many years of no action. Nothing's been done, so I'm tired of waiting. I had the investigator over the case right now out of Scurry County. He told me one time, he said he doesn't care if it takes 20 years to do this. And I do care if it takes 20 years. I don't want the person that hurt my kid that doesn't need to walk the street for 20 years.
You think that person is still out there somewhere?
Yeah. I think he's here in this town. Big Spring, Texas.
You think he's in Big Spring?
Mm-hmm. I know he was 2 months ago.
Do you have somebody in mind?
Sean Atkins.
You think it's Sean Atkins, the only named suspect?
Yep. And I think that Billie Jean knows something. She said too many lies. She's avoided too much. And she knows more than what she said.
But Clint never stopped pushing. Not for a single day. He kept calling investigators. He kept sending messages. He kept showing up and demanding answers. And when the phone calls and the messages did not produce results fast enough, he took his fight somewhere else entirely. He took it to the internet. He began posting about Haley regularly on social media, not just on the anniversaries of her disappearance or on her birthday, but consistently, week after week, month after month. He shared photographs of her. He shared updates about the case. He wrote openly about his grief, and his determination, and his refusal to let his daughter's story be reduced to a cold case file collecting dust in a county archive somewhere in West Texas. Those posts reached thousands of people over the years. And in 2019, they reached exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. An anonymous individual, by name someone who had been a high school student back in the spring and early summer of 2011, came across one of Clint's posts online. And something about it triggered a memory of something they had found years earlier, not long after Haley disappeared. At the time, this person had no idea who Haley Dunn was. They had not connected what they found to any investigation, any news story, or any missing child. To them, it had simply been a random discovery that seemed unremarkable and unimportant in the moment, so they had never reported it, never mentioned it to anyone, never thought about it again, until that day in 2019 when Clint's post stopped them cold. Suddenly, the memory of that old discovery took on an entirely different meaning. This person reached out to Clint directly and told him what they had found all those years ago. The exact nature of those items has never been publicly disclosed. Investigators have kept those details confidential as part of the ongoing case, but what Clint later revealed to reporters was deeply significant in its own right. He said the items had been found in an area that search teams had covered multiple times during the earliest and most intensive phases of the investigation. an area that volunteers and law enforcement had walked through, searched and cleared, and somehow missed. That revelation alone raised serious and troubling questions about what else might have been overlooked in those critical early weeks. And it added an entirely new dimension of urgency to a case that had already been waiting far too long for answers. Around the same time, another figure had been working quietly and persistently in the background of this investigation for years. Her name was Erica Morse, a private investigator who had been connected to Clint in the case practically from the beginning. Over the years, Erica had made it her personal mission to keep pressure on the investigation, cultivate sources within law enforcement, and follow every lead that the official channels either could not or would not pursue on their own. She had become one of the most tenacious and dedicated voices demanding accountability in Haley's case. And in the fall of 2019, something landed in her inbox that pulled her focus squarely back onto Sean Atkins. Beginning in October of 2019, Erica began receiving messages from women living in West Texas and surrounding areas. These women described a pattern of disturbing online contact from a man who had introduced himself using the name Casey. Erica immediately recognized the significance of that name. Casey was the middle name of Sean Atkins. That was not a coincidence she was willing to overlook. She asked the women to send her the photos and videos the man had been transmitting to them online. When she reviewed that material, she was convinced the person in those images was Sean. She had spent years studying this case, and she believed she knew exactly who she was looking at. On October 28, 2019, Erica personally accompanied one of those women to a local police station to file an official report about the harassment. What happened next was one of the most frustrating and disheartening moments in an investigation already full of them. The officer who received the complaint refused to accept it. He told the woman her account was not credible. He accused her of fabricating the story entirely, and just like that, the door was closed. Erica Morse did not accept that outcome quietly. She wrote and published an open letter addressed to law enforcement and to the public. In that letter, she laid out what she had found, what the women had reported, and what she believed it all meant in the context of the Haley Dunn case, and she issued a direct and pointed warning. If Sean Atkins was not taken into custody, there would be more victims. Her words were not vague. They were not cautious. They were a clear, urgent, documented warning on the public record. For a time, those words hung in the air without producing action. The months passed. 2019 became 2020, and still no arrest. Then in early 2021, something shifted. District Attorney Ricky Thompson of Mitchell County made a decision that would finally begin to move this case in the direction it had needed to go for a very long time. He reached out to a division of law enforcement specifically built for situations like this one, the Texas Rangers Cold Case Unit. This is a specialized team within the Texas Department of Public Safety, dedicated entirely to investigations that have gone unsolved for years and need a fresh set of eyes, additional resources, and renewed investigative energy to move forward. The Texas Rangers Cold Case Unit took a hard look at everything connected to the Haley Dunn investigation. The cell phone records, the bank activity, the polygraph results, the items recovered from the homes, the timeline inconsistencies, the statements that never held up, all of it. And after reviewing the full scope of evidence and consulting with investigators who had worked the case over the years, they made a significant legal move. They went to court to request a warrant to collect a DNA sample directly from Sean Casey Atkins. That warrant was issued on June 13, 2021, and on that same day, more than 10 years after Haley Dunn was first reported missing, more than 8 years after her remains were found in a field in Scurry County, and nearly 11 years after she vanished from a house on Chestnut Street in Colorado City, Texas, Sean Casey Atkins was placed under arrest. He was formally charged with the murder of Haley Dunn.
Reaction from Colorado City tonight is emotional and also getting straight to the point. Sean Atkins is sitting in the Mitchell County Jail tonight, charged for the murder of 13-year-old Haley Dunn. She first went missing over 10 years ago. You know, this community, they have spent more than a decade searching for a young girl, searching for answers, searching really for justice. We are a step closer to that tonight. The arrest of Sean Atkins is what the community of Colorado City has been waiting on for a...
The news traveled fast. Across Colorado City, across Texas, and across the true crime community that had been following this case for over a decade, the reaction was immediate and emotional. People who had spent years demanding answers and pushing for accountability felt something they had almost given up on feeling in connection with this case. They felt hope. Clint Dunn, the man who had stood on his porch with binoculars while a party raged across the street, the man who had checked every dumpster and walked every alley and made every phone call and written every post, the man who had refused for 11 years to let his daughter's name be forgotten. That man finally had the moment he had been fighting for. His statement was quiet and measured in the way that only someone who has survived years of grief and uncertainty can be quiet and measured. He said there were simply no words to describe what he was feeling. He thanked everyone who had searched for Haley and everyone who had fought tirelessly to see an arrest made. And then he said the thing that had been driving him every single day for over a decade. He said he just hoped that real justice would finally be served in a courtroom. Billie Jean Dunn also responded publicly to the arrest. She said she could not claim to be surprised. She acknowledged that she had stayed with Sean after Haley disappeared, and she said she could not fully explain that choice looking back, but she said she was grateful that an arrest had finally been made and that Sean would now be required to answer for what had happened. Sean Adkins was held on a bond set at $2 million, a figure that reflected the severity of the charges and the court's determination to keep him in custody while the legal process moved forward. In December of 2021, a grand jury formally indicted him on charges of murder and evidence tampering, with court documents alleging that he had struck Haley and then taken deliberate steps to conceal her body. For the first time in 11 years, the case had a defendant. It had charges, it had an indictment, and it had the full attention of a legal system that now had no choice but to confront what it had been allowed to sit unresolved for far too long.
Investigates team, the Mitchell County District Attorney's Office has released a single page from Sean Adkins' arrest warrant. He is the man police hold responsible for killing Haley Dunn in Colorado City. Big Spring police arrested him last month, but we don't know why. When KCBD requested the arrest warrant, we were sent to Mitchell County, and the DA there refused, citing Texas law, claiming it blocked us from access to this public record since it involves the alleged abuse and death of a child. So now, while we're waiting on the Attorney General to rule on this decision, in the meantime, it has been 10 days since our request for the entire arrest warrant and affidavit. We have only this part of the warrant so far, ordering any law enforcement agent to arrest Sean Adkins for the charge of murder out of Colorado City. But that does not shed any light on what led Mitchell County to that conclusion. So our investigates team will keep pursuing your right to know about what police say led to the death of Haley Dunn.
But in the world of true crime, as anyone who has followed these cases knows, an arrest is not a conviction. An indictment is not a verdict. And the road from a courtroom filing to a finding of guilt is often longer, more complicated, and more heartbreaking than anyone on the outside ever anticipates. The people of Colorado City knew that. Clint Dunn knew that. Erica Morse knew that. And as the case moved into the court system and the legal proceedings began to unfold, every single person connected to this story was about to find out just how difficult that road was still going to be. Because the fight for Haley Dunn was not over yet, not even close. There is a phrase that gets used in the legal system that sounds reasonable and procedural and entirely neutral on paper. Insufficient evidence, 2 words, clean, clinical, professional. But for the family of a murdered child who has been waiting more than a decade for accountability, those 2 words do not sound neutral at all. They sound like a door slamming shut in a hallway that was supposed to lead somewhere. They sound like the end of something that was never supposed to end this way. And in June of 2023, those 2 words became the defining statement of the Haley Dunn case. After more than a decade of waiting for an arrest, after the indictment in December of 2021, after $2 million in bond and formal murder charges, and the renewed energy of the Texas Rangers cold case unit, prosecutors in Mitchell County made the decision to dismiss all charges against Sean Casey Adkins. The dismissal was filed without prejudice, meaning the door to future prosecution was technically left open, but the practical reality was undeniable. Sean Adkins walked out of the legal system a free man, and the case that had consumed an entire community for over a decade went back to where it had been before the arrest, officially unsolved. The explanation offered by prosecutors was straightforward in its legal logic, even if it was devastating in its human impact. The case against Sean Adkins was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. There were no eyewitnesses to what happened inside that house on Chestnut Street on December 27, 2010. There was no physical weapon recovered and tied directly to a suspect. There was no singular piece of forensic evidence that a jury could look at and say beyond any reasonable doubt that this man, and this man alone, was responsible for the death of Haley Dunn. The cell phone records placed him in the wrong locations at the wrong times. The polygraph results indicated deception. His own statements had pointed investigators directly toward the county where her body was eventually found, but pointing in a direction is not the same as proof, and in a court of law, proof is everything. One investigator connected to the case did not stay silent when the charges were dropped. In a statement that was widely covered and deeply felt by everyone who had followed this case, that investigator called the dismissal a miscarriage of justice, not a legal technicality, not a procedural outcome, a miscarriage of justice. Those words came from someone who had spent significant time inside this investigation, who had seen the evidence firsthand, and who believed with full conviction that the right man had been charged, and that the system had simply not been able to deliver the outcome the evidence deserved. For Clint Dunn, the dismissal was another wound in a long line of wounds that this case had inflicted on him. But anyone who had watched this man over the years, who had seen what he was willing to endure, and how he responded to every setback this investigation threw at him, already knew that this was not going to stop him. Clint had stood on that porch with binoculars. He had checked every dumpster in Colorado City. He had called investigators so many times over so many years that his determination had become part of the documented record of this case itself. A father like that does not stop because a prosecutor files a dismissal, and he did not stop. As of the time this documentary was produced, the case of Haley Dunn remains listed as an active cold case with the Texas Rangers. Sean Casey Adkins remains the named suspect on that listing. A Crime Stoppers reward of $3,000 is still being offered for any information that leads directly to an arrest in connection with Haley's murder. The line is still open, the case is still being monitored, and according to more recent reporting, there are indications that investigative attention has once again been directed toward this case as new information and new resources have been applied. Billie Jean Dunn, through her attorney, has continued to deny any personal involvement in her daughter's disappearance and death. She has not been charged with any crime directly connected to Haley's murder. That chapter of this story remains, like so much else, unresolved. Private investigator Erica Morse has continued her work. She's not walked away from this case. She has not accepted the dismissal of charges as the final word on what happened to Haley Dunn. In the community of Colorado City, a town of barely 4,000 people that was changed forever by what happened on Chestnut Street on a cold December morning, has not forgotten either. Small towns have long memories, and the people of Colorado City remember Haley Dunn the way communities remember the ones they could not protect, with grief, with guilt, and with a stubborn, persistent refusal to move on until the truth is fully told. Because here's what the record of this true crime case ultimately reveals when you step back and look at all of it together. This was not a case without evidence. This was not a case without a clear direction. From almost the very beginning, investigators knew who they were looking at. The cell phone records were there. The timeline contradictions were there. The polygraph indicators were there. The fact that the named suspect had pointed to the exact county where the victim's remains were eventually found, that was there from the earliest days of the investigation. And yet, for reasons that touch on everything from the limitations of forensic science to the high burden of proof in a criminal courtroom to decisions made in the first critical hours and days of the case, justice for Haley Dunn has remained just out of reach. That is not just a legal problem, it is a human problem. It is a problem with real consequences for a real family in a real town in West Texas. And it is the reason that cases like this one matter to the true crime community beyond the details and the timelines and the evidence logs. Because behind every cold case file, behind every unsolved homicide listing, behind every Crime Stoppers reward that has been sitting unclaimed for years, there is a father like Clint Dunn, standing on his porch, still looking, still fighting, still refusing to let the world forget. Haley Dunn was born on August 28, 1997, in Colorado City, Texas. She was a cheerleader, she played the saxophone, she competed in volleyball, basketball, and softball. She loved school, loved her friends, and loved her father so much that she crossed the street to say hello to him every single day of her life. She was 13 years old when someone decided that her life did not matter, and she deserved far better than the fate she was given, and far better than the justice system has so far been able to deliver on her behalf. This documentary is a record of what happened to her, but it is also a reminder that this story is not over. The case is still open, the suspect is still named, The family's still fighting, and somewhere out there, someone knows something that could change everything. If you have any information connected to the disappearance and murder of Haley Dunn, the Texas Rangers Cold Case Unit is still actively receiving tips. The Crime Stoppers line remains open, and Clint Dunn is still posting, still calling, still fighting for his daughter the way he has fought for her every single day since December 28th, 2010. Because that is what a father does, and that is what Haley Dunn deserves.